Alright, so today we'll also be doing the center support bearing on a 1991 Volvo 740. So what you'll need to do first is jack up the car, and then from there you'll need a 15 and 17 millimeter wrench. You want to hold the 17 on the back and have the 15 on the front, and start loosening each of the 4 drive shaft bolts. And you'll need a helper for this because when you try to remove them, what's going to happen is you're going to encounter the drive shaft turning, so you'll have to have a helper run the e-brake as well while you're getting these bolts out. Now that you have your 4 drive shaft bolts out, now it's time to remove this plate here. It should be just a 12 millimeter, and there should only be 4 bolts on it. Now it may make it easier if you also loosen the 2 in the middle to help get it out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And they're not torqued in there too heavy, so you can actually get them by hand. Just be prepared whenever you get these out that the drive shaft will try to drop on you. So I got the 2 out of the center just for the heck of it. Maybe it will help me, maybe it won't. It's down to personal preference, really. So you can see it's starting to drop a little bit. So now I'm holding the drive shaft while getting the last 2 out. It can be tricky, especially when you get near the end and it doesn't want to drop the bolts out. All right. There you go, plate's loose. You can see your center support bearing here and mount. And now that that's out, you should be able to pull on the, let me see, sometimes it may be stuck, but you have to take and separate the U-joint coupler from the transmission to the drive shaft. So you may need a pry bar to get these apart and get this to retract all the way. So now I got that loose with a hammer. Now all that has to do is come out like this, and then you pull on this whole front section and it will come straight out. And there's your front drive shaft section.
The transmission fluid?
Yes, it is.
Shit, do I have a bad rear?
No, it would be leaking from over here if it was. This is all
okay.
old.
Okay.
I think. Probably. I can just tighten that up if need be.
I need to do a flush on that anyway.
Okay. So now you got your drive shaft center section, or front section off. What you want to do is take this piece off. It just simply pulls right off. All it is a dust cover for the 2 sections of the drive shaft. So what you're left with right now is there's an inner seal right there, an outer one here, the actual center support bearing itself, which is behind both of these, and the mount. So the way this comes apart is you have to hammer off the center support mount that way, and you have to hammer off the center support bearing the opposite way. So that makes it a little bit complicated whenever you're trying to, install one of these. So it's going to take a lot of sledgehammering and a lot of yelling, but it can be done. All right. So I've done a few of these. The best way I've found to get this center support mount off on the 740s is you line it up with a cinder block here, and you put your drive shaft so it's basically, whenever you're hitting this, it's hitting against the cinder block. And I've gotten these off with a lot of success this way. But every once in a while you'll have to rotate it so you can get to the other sides. And just be careful not to hit this piece as much as you can. You'll eventually end up nicking it once or twice, but the less nicks the better. Alright, so once you get the old bearing off, putting the new bearing on is just the reverse of removal. You just want to hit both sides intermittently so it kind of walks the bearing on. Once you have that, make sure you actually first have this piece on the drive shaft before you actually put the bearing on. Once you do that, then you hit the then you'll hit the new bearing on. It's just a reverse of removal. And interval patterns, left, right, up, down, and it'll walk itself onto there. And then once you have that done, then you can install your center bearing mount. And all you want to do is just hit that onto the bearing itself. And then once that's done, you'll be good to go. Actually, I remember the way I did this. I actually took the pry bar and I put it on a metal piece in the inside, and I hit it that way.
I was gonna say, wait, why don't we just twist it and then do it again that way?
It's
at least even it out. Actually, wait.
I don't know if it's actually bringing it down.
There we go. Actually, hold on, wait 1 second.
Okay. Now that you have your new drive shaft, the center support bearing and mount installed, what you want to do first is take the old collar or dust boot, whatever you want to call it, off of this one and put it on your drive shaft. It's going to make it a lot easier for installation whenever you do it. Next thing, clean this off and reapply a little bit of new grease, not a lot, inside of the center support, the front drive shaft where the center support bearing is. So, very important step is you want to have the e-brake off and you want to rotate the drive shaft to where you see this yellow mark here. There will be a corresponding yellow mark and an arrow on your front drive shaft. You want to make sure those are in alignment, otherwise you're going to have a bad time because you're going to get a lot of driveline vibration. So with that, get the 2 alignment marks ready and go ahead, and it may take 1 or 2 tries, but you want to get the marks lined up while sliding the new the redone drive shaft onto the rear part of the drive shaft. And once you have that, double check your alignment marks, make sure they're still good. And another good way to check is you want to see that the U-joints are all in the same orientation, front to back. So now that I have this up, these are good, this is good, this is where it's supposed to be. I'm going to go ahead and put in my front drive shaft bolts. Now, they will only go in one way. You may have to rotate the whole assembly for it to match. And whenever you do a final tightening of these, what you want to do is have your friend or whoever activate the e-brake or turn on the e-brake so that you can get a good tightening on these. That way, they're not going to fly off whenever you're driving. That would be a very bad thing to happen.
Note on the bolts for the drive shaft to the rear of the transmission, make sure the threads are pointing towards the engine. Threads pointing towards the front of the car, of the bolt.
I mean, I guess you can do it another way, but this is the best way of doing it. And this is the way that Volvo intended you to do it. I'm going to go ahead and also install the center support mount plate that was originally on there. So when you're here as well, go ahead and slip this dust boot back on. So it should look like that. Rotate this back down. And the way this plate is installed is like this. So you may have those alignment marks. You may have to align the front section here and the back section, but at least you can get this in the air for now using the bolts, which are 12mm heads. They have 12mm heads on them. Excuse me. Now you may have to end up pushing the center support mount back just a little bit to start threading these bolts, but it should not be much at all. Once you have these all up there, then it makes sense to do the final tightening on the front drive shaft bolts to the transmission. You don't want to go too early on that, just in case. So this would be the last thing you want to tighten on this plate is the actual center support mount. Okay, that's not going anywhere. Now I'm going to draw my attention to tightening up the last of the bolts for the transmission, which would be for the front drive shaft. Alright, well, once you have those bolts tightened, you can go ahead and drop the car on the ground, or if you want to, you can have it in the air. Put it in drive, run it up to about 50 miles an hour while it's in the air and see if you get any vibration. If not, then go ahead and give it a test drive and you should be good to go.